It was a cold Tuesday night in Greenwich when the neighbours heard the screaming. They saw a woman, 8 months pregnant, stumbling down the marble steps of the Sterling estate, clutching her stomach while rain lashed against her face. Behind her, Richard Sterling, a man worth $40 million, stood in the doorway, laughing, with his arm wrapped around a woman half his age. He threw a suitcase into the mud and slammed the door, believing he had just discarded a piece of trash. But Richard made a fatal miscalculation that night. He forgot who her family was. He didn't know that by sunrise, a phone call would be made to South Boston, waking up 2 men who had been waiting a lifetime for an excuse to hurt him. The Sterling estate on Round Hill Road was a monument to ego. It was all glass, steel and cold, imported marble, a fortress that Richard Sterling had built to prove to the world that he was no longer the poor kid from Ohio. Inside, the air was always set to a crisp 68 degrees, smelling faintly of expensive leather and ambition. For Celine Sterling, however, the house had become a mausoleum. Celine sat at the long mahogany dining table, her hands resting protectively over her swollen belly. She was 34, with soft features, and eyes that used to sparkle but were now rimmed with the red fatigue of crying. She was 8 months pregnant with their first son. Across from her sat Richard, scrolling through his phone, ignoring the dinner she had spent 3 hours preparing. "Richard," Celine said softly, breaking the silence. "Dr. Evans called today. He's worried about my blood pressure. He said I need to avoid stress." Richard didn't look up. He took a sip of his scotch. "Then stop stressing, Celine. It's not complicated." "It is complicated when my husband hasn't come home before midnight in 3 weeks," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's complicated when I find receipts for jewelry I never received." Richard slammed his phone down. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the cavernous room. He looked at her, not with anger, but with a chilling indifference that was far worse. "I work," Richard said, his voice smooth and cold. "I work to pay for this house, for that organic food you eat, for the doctors. Do not lecture me on my schedule." Just then, the front door opened. The heavy click of heels on marble signaled an arrival. Celine froze. The staff had gone home for the night. A woman walked into the dining room. She was stunning, tall, blonde, wearing a red dress that looked like it had been painted on. It was Jessica Vane, Richard's executive assistant. She was 24, sharp as a tack, and had a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry I'm late, Richard," Jessica said, walking past Celine as if she were a piece of furniture. She walked right up to Richard and kissed him on the cheek, lingering just long enough to make a point. Celine stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What is she doing here?" Richard stood up too, adjusting his suit jacket. "Jessica is moving in, Celine." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Celine gripped the edge of the table. "Excuse me." "I'm filing for divorce in the morning," Richard said, as casually as if he were ordering coffee. "My lawyers have drafted a prenup enforcement. You get a settlement, of course. But the house, the cars, the assets, they stay." You can't be serious," Celine stammered, tears spilling over. "I'm having your son in 4 weeks, Richard." Jessica poured herself a glass of wine from the bottle on the table. "Actually," she purred, "Richard and I think the environment here is too toxic for a baby. He's going to petition for full custody once the child is born. We'll raise him." The cruelty of it took Celine's breath away. "You are insane," she spat out. "Get out of my house." Richard laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "It's not your house, Celine. It never was. I bought it. I paid for it. You were just decoration. And frankly, You've let yourself go." He gestured vaguely at her pregnancy bump. "It's depressing to look at." "I want her out," Jessica said, bored. "Now, Richard, I don't want to wake up and see her moping around tomorrow." Richard nodded. He walked over to the hallway, grabbed a suitcase that had already been packed. Celine realized with horror that they had planned this days ago, and threw it toward the front door. "You heard her," Richard said. "Get out." "It's pouring rain," Celine cried, clutching her stomach as a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. "I have nowhere to go. My cards. You cancelled my cards, didn't you?" "Consider it a lesson in independence," Richard sneered. He walked over, grabbed Celine by the arm, his grip bruisingly tight, and dragged her toward the door. "Richard, stop! You're hurting the baby!" she screamed, digging her heels in. He didn't care. He shoved her through the heavy oak doors. She stumbled, her foot catching on the threshold, and fell hard onto the wet stone of the porch. The impact jarred her entire body. She gasped, curling into a ball to protect her stomach. The last thing she saw before the door slammed shut was Jessica leaning against Richard's shoulder, smirking, and Richard's face, twisted in a look of absolute disgust. "Don't come back, Celine. If you do, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." The lock clicked. The porch lights flickered off. Celine Sterling was alone in the dark, in the rain, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a suitcase she couldn't lift. The rain in Connecticut in late October is bone-chilling. It wasn't snow yet, but it was a heavy, freezing sheet of water that soaked through Celine's maternity blouse in seconds. She sat on the steps for 10 minutes, too in shock to move. She kept waiting for the door to open. "He can't do this," she told herself. "He's a narcissist. He's cruel. But he's not a monster. He won't leave his unborn child in the freezing rain." But the house remained dark. Pain radiated from her lower back. She slowly pulled herself up, using the stone railing for support. She checked her phone. 14% battery. She tried to call her best friend, Linda. "The number you have dialed is not accepting calls from this number." She tried her college roommate, Emily. "The number you have dialed." Richard had been thorough. He was a tech mogul. He controlled the family plan. He had likely blocked her outgoing calls to anyone he had influence over, or perhaps he had already spun a lie to them. Told them Celine had had a mental break, that she was dangerous, that they shouldn't answer. She walked down the long driveway, the gravel crunching under her wet flats. Every step was agony. By the time she reached the main road, she was shivering violently. A car zoomed past, splashing dirty water onto her legs. She needed shelter. The nearest town was 3 miles away. She began to walk. An hour later, Celine collapsed into the lobby of a Motel 6 on the outskirts of Greenwich. The night clerk, a teenager with headphones around his neck, looked up, startled by the sight of a soaking wet, pregnant woman with mascara running down her face. I need a room," she chattered, her teeth clacking together. "ID and credit card," the kid said automatically. Celine fumbled for her wallet. She pulled out the black Amex. The kid swiped it. Declined. She pulled out the Visa. Declined. Please," Celine begged. "My husband, there's been a mistake. I have cash. Wait." She dug through her purse. She had $20 and some loose change. "I have $20. Please. Just for a few hours. I just need to get dry." The kid looked at her, then at the computer. He sighed. "Look, lady, I can't. My boss watches the cameras. If I give you a room for $20, I'm fired." "Please," she whispered, sliding to the floor. "I'm pregnant. I'm in pain." The kid hesitated. He looked around, then reached under the counter and pulled out a frantic-looking towel. "You can sit in the lobby for a bit. But you can't stay. Selene sat on the hard plastic chair, wrapped in the scratchy towel. She stared at her phone. 4% battery. She had one option left, the option Richard had forbidden her from using. When she married Richard 5 years ago, he had made it clear. You are a sterling now. We don't associate with trash. Your brothers are trash. They are criminals, Selene. If you want this life, you cut them off. Completely. And she had. She had chosen love, or what she thought was love, over blood. She hadn't spoken to Connor or Liam O'Malley in 5 years. She didn't even know if they were still in South Boston. She didn't know if they were in jail or dead. But as another cramp seized her belly, sharp and terrifying, she knew she had no pride left to lose. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the number she had memorized in childhood. It was an old landline number for the auto body shop their father used to run. Ring, ring, ring. Yeah, O'Malley's. A gruff, gravelly voice answered. Selena's breath hitched. It was Connor. She recognized that voice instantly. Deep, steady, dangerous. Connor, she choked out. There was a long silence on the other end. The background noise of pneumatic drills and heavy metal music seemed to fade away. Selene? His voice dropped an octave. It wasn't angry, it was cautious. Is that you? Connor, help me, she sobbed, the dam finally breaking. Please, I messed up. I messed up so bad. Where are you? The question came instantly. No, how have you been? No, why are you calling? Just where? I'm in a motel lobby in Greenwich. He kicked me out, Connor. Richard kicked me out. I'm on the street. I'm having the baby soon, and he took everything and... Did he hit you? The voice on the phone was now so cold it made the freezing rain feel warm. He shoved me. I fell. Connor, I'm scared. Liam. Connor's voice roared away from the receiver, sounding like a clap of thunder. Get the truck, now. He came back to the phone. Selene, listen to me. Stay exactly where you are. Do not move. If anyone tries to touch you, you scream. I don't care if it's the cops. You scream. How long? She whispered. I'm in Southie. Greenwich is 3 hours. We'll be there in 2. Keep your phone on. My battery is dying. Then turn it off. Save the last %. We are coming. And Selene? Yes. You aren't a sterling anymore, Connor said, and she could hear the sound of a heavy metal door slamming shut and an engine roaring to life. You're an O'Malley, and nobody touches an O'Malley and lives to brag about it. The line went dead. Selena lowered the phone. For the first time all night, despite the cold and the fear, her heart rate slowed. She wrapped the towel tighter. Richard Sterling thought he had thrown away a helpless housewife. He didn't realize he had just declared war on the South Boston underworld. The hours between the phone call and the arrival were a blur of fluorescent lights and the smell of stale floor cleaner. Selena had drifted into a semi-conscious state, her head resting against the cold wall of the motel lobby. The teenage clerk had stopped watching her. He was now engrossed in a video game on his phone, occasionally glancing up with a look that was a mix of pity and annoyance. He wanted to go home. He didn't want a pregnant woman dying in his lobby. Outside, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour, hammering against the glass doors like handfuls of gravel. At 2:14 a.m., the headlights appeared. They weren't the polite, yellow-hued beams of the luxury sedans that usually prowled Greenwich. These were blindingly white, high-intensity LEDs mounted on a roll bar. A massive, matte black Ford F-350 dually roared into the parking lot, taking up 2 spaces right in front of the entrance. The engine didn't purr, it growled, a deep, mechanical thrum that vibrated the glass of the motel lobby. The clerk pulled his headphones down, looking alarmed. "Whoa!" The truck doors opened. Two men stepped out into the rain as if the weather didn't exist. The first was Liam O'Malley. At 32, he was a wall of muscle, wearing a soaking wet Carhartt jacket and work boots that looked like they could kick through a brick wall. He had a buzz cut and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite, with a jagged scar running through his left eyebrow. The second man was Connor. He was older, 38, leaner but radiating a more terrifying kind of intensity. He wore a dark wool coat over a flannel shirt. He didn't look like a brawler. He looked like a general. He moved with a calm, predatory grace. The automatic doors slid open. A gust of freezing wind blew into the lobby, carrying the scent of rain, diesel, and old tobacco. Selena lifted her head. Her vision was blurry. "Connor?" Liam reached her first. He crossed the lobby in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands, usually rough and covered in grease from the shop, hovered over her for a second, terrified to touch her, before gently gripping her shoulders. "We got you, Sadie," Liam said, his voice cracking. He used the childhood nickname she hadn't heard in 5 years. "We got you." Connor stood over them, scanning the room. His eyes landed on the teenage clerk. The clerk shrank back into his chair, raising his hands. I let her stay," the kid stammered. "My boss said kick her out, but I gave her a towel. I didn't charge her." Connor stared at the boy for a long, uncomfortable silence. He was assessing the truth. Finally, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a thick roll of cash, peeled off $300 bills, and slammed them onto the counter. "You didn't see us," Connor said. His voice was low, devoid of accent, and absolutely final. "And delete the security footage from the last 3 hours. Now." The kid nodded frantically, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Done! It's gone, I swear." Connor turned back to his siblings. Liam had scooped Celine up into his arms. She looked painfully small against his bulk, her pregnant belly the only thing defining her shape under the wet clothes. She groaned as he lifted her. "Easy, Liam," Connor warned. "Her back." I know, Liam whispered. "I got her." They carried her out to the truck. The back seat had been prepared. They had laid down heavy blankets and pillows, creating a nest. Liam placed her inside gently, covering her with a dry wool blanket that smelled like home, like sawdust and peppermint. Connor climbed into the driver's seat, while Liam got in the back with Celine, sitting on the floorboard so she could lay across the seat. "Where are we going?" Celine whispered, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. "Not Boston. He'll look for me in Boston." Connor looked at her through the rearview mirror. His eyes were hard, but not at her. "He isn't looking for you, Celine. He thinks you're trash. He thinks you're going to crawl into a hole and die." He put the truck in gear. "We're going to Bridgeport," Connor said. "St. Vincent's Hospital. We know a doctor there who doesn't ask questions about insurance cards. You need to be checked out." "He hurt the baby," Selena sobbed, the reality of the night crashing down on her again. "He threw me. I fell on the stone." The temperature in the truck seemed to drop 10 degrees. Liam's hand, resting on the seat near Selene's knee, clenched into a fist so tight his knuckles turned white. The leather of the seat creaked under the pressure. "He threw you?" Liam asked, his voice a low growl. "Yes," she wept. "And Jessica?" She was there. She laughed. Connor didn't say a word. He simply stared at the road ahead, the windshield wipers slapping a rhythmic beat. He reached into the center console, pulled out a burner phone, and dialed a number. "It's me," Connor said into the phone. "Wake up the boys. We have a job. No, not a heist. It's an extermination." He hung up and pressed the accelerator. The massive truck surged forward, merging onto I-95, hunting for the darkness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was a woman who had seen everything. Working the ER in Bridgeport meant she dealt with gunshot wounds, overdoses, and domestic batteries on a nightly basis. But when the two large men carried the pregnant woman into the private examination room she had secured for them, a favor for a debt Connor had forgiven years ago, she felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't just the bruising on Selene's hip and elbow, which was turning a deep, angry purple. It was the malnutrition. It was 4 a.m. Selene was hooked up to a fetal monitor. The steady swish-swish of the baby's heartbeat was the only sound in the room, a rhythmic reassurance that life was still holding on. "The baby is stressed, but the heartbeat is strong," Dr. Rodriguez said, pulling off her gloves. She looked at Connor, who was standing in the corner, arms crossed, watching everything like a hawk. "But she is severely dehydrated. And her blood work... Connor, she's anemic, severely. Has she been eating?" Liam was sitting by the bed, holding Selena's hand. He looked up, his eyes red. "Selena, you told us you were living the high life. Organic food, private chefs." Selena stared at the ceiling, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. The shame was worse than the pain. Admitting the truth meant admitting she had been wrong to leave them. It meant admitting she had traded her family for a gilded cage. He put me on a diet," Selena whispered. 6 months ago. He said I was getting unseemly. He fired the chef. He controlled the grocery orders. If I bought anything extra, he would cancel the cards." Liam stood up, kicking the metal chair back so hard it dented the wall. "He starved you? The man has $40 million and he starved his pregnant wife?" "He said it was for my own good," she said, her voice hollow. "He said I was embarrassing him at galas." "And the bruising?" Dr. Rodriguez asked gently. "He shoved me out the door. It was raining. I slipped on the marble." Dr. Rodriguez nodded, tight-lipped. "I'm going to keep her for 24 hours to monitor the baby. She needs fluids, iron, and rest. Absolute rest. No stress." She looked at Connor. "If the police ask..." "She was never here," Connor said. "Put her down as Jane Doe. Cash payment." "Done." Dr. Rodriguez left the room. The silence that followed was heavy. Liam was pacing the small room like a caged tiger. "I'm going to kill him," Liam said. It wasn't a scream. It was a statement of fact. "I'm going to drive back to Greenwich, kick down that glass door, and I'm going to beat him until he stops moving. Then I'm going to find the blonde and shave her head." "No," Connor said. Liam spun around. "No? Connor, look at her. Look at what he did. If you kill him, you go to jail for life. Selena gets nothing. The baby grows up visiting his uncle through glass," Connor said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "And Richard becomes a martyr. A tragedy." Connor walked over to the bed. He brushed a wet strand of hair off Selena's forehead. "We don't want him dead, Liam. Not yet. We want him destroyed." Connor's eyes were cold, calculating flint. "We want him to lose the money, the house, the reputation, the girl. We want him to be standing in the rain with nothing, just like he left Selene. And then, when he has nothing left to lose, then we pay him a visit." Selene gripped Connor's hand. "He's powerful, Connor. He has lawyers. He has security. He made me sign things. I don't even know what I signed last year." "Lawyers fight within the law," Connor said. "We don't." Connor turned to Liam. "Go to the truck. Get the laptop. And call Sully. Tell him I need a full scrub on Richard Sterling. I want to know where he banks, who he cheats with, who he cheats on, and every dirty deal he's made to get that $40 million. Men like that don't get rich playing by the rules. There's dirt. We just have to find it. Liam took a deep breath, the violence in his eyes shifting into focus. He nodded. Sully's awake. I'll get the laptop. After Liam left, Connor sat on the edge of the bed. Rest, Celine. You're safe now. He'll file for divorce tomorrow, Selene said weakly. He said he's going to take the baby. He said the house is toxic, so he'll get full custody. Connor actually smiled then. It was a dark, dangerous smile that didn't reach his eyes. Let him file, Connor said. By the time the ink is dry on those papers, Richard Sterling won't have a house to bring a baby home to. Meanwhile, in Greenwich, the sun was beginning to rise over the Sterling estate. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and glittering. Richard Sterling sat on his Italian leather sofa, a tumbler of scotch in his hand, his third of the morning. He hadn't slept, but not out of guilt. He was wired. He felt a manic sense of freedom. Jessica was asleep in the master bedroom, his bedroom now. The Selene smell of vanilla and lavender was still there, but he would have the cleaners scrub it out today. He picked up his phone. He had a notification from his bank. Attempted transaction, Motel 6. Declined. He chuckled. Pathetic. He dialed his lawyer, Arthur Pendleton. It was 5:30 a.m., but for the hourly rate he paid, Arthur answered on the first ring. Richard? Is everything all right? Better than all right, Arthur. I did it. She's gone. Gone? What do you mean? The lawyer sounded wary. I kicked her out last night. There was a long silence on the other end. Richard, you kicked a woman who was 8 months pregnant out of your house? In a storm? Without a legal separation agreement in place? She was trespassing, Richard said dismissively. Look, file the papers today. Incompatibility. Mental instability. I want full custody of the child. She's homeless now, Arthur. No judge will give a baby to a homeless woman. Richard, this is risky. If the press gets wind of this... The press loves me, Richard snapped. Just do it, and freeze the joint accounts. Oh wait, I already did that. He hung up the phone and walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked his manicured grounds. He felt invincible. He was the king of his castle. He had the money, the power, and the hot new mistress. The old, boring wife was someone else's problem now. He didn't notice the black drone hovering silently a mile away, its high-powered camera lens zooming in through the glass walls of his fortress. He didn't know that inside a hospital room in Bridgeport, a hacker named Sully was already inside his iCloud, watching the very same emails Richard was reading, and he certainly didn't know that Liam O'Malley was currently sitting in a truck 5 miles away, cleaning a very large, very illegal handgun, just waiting for the signal. The war had started, and Richard Sterling was the only one who didn't know he was already under siege. The waiting room of St. Vincent's Hospital was quiet, save for the hum of the vending machine and the low murmur of Liam and Connor O'Malley. It had been 24 hours since they pulled Selene from the rain. She was stable, sleeping heavily under the influence of sedatives Dr. Rodriguez had administered to stop the premature contractions. In the corner of the room, Connor sat with a laptop open on his knees. He hadn't slept. His eyes were fixed on the screen, watching lines of code scroll past as Sully, their contact in Boston, dismantled Richard Sterling's digital life. Liam was pacing. He had gone out to get coffee, but had come back with nothing. He couldn't eat. He couldn't drink. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his little sister shivering on the floor of that motel lobby. "Sit down, Liam," Connor said, not looking up. "You're making me nervous." "I went back to the house," Liam confessed. Connor stopped typing. He looked up slowly. "I told you to stay away." "I didn't go in," Liam said, his voice thick with suppressed rage. "I parked in the woods behind the estate. I just wanted to see." "And?" "He hired a cleaning crew," Liam said, his hands shaking. "I watched them through the back windows. They were in the nursery, Connor. They were taking the crib apart. They were putting the toys, the clothes, everything Selena bought, into black trash bags." Connor's jaw tightened. "Then I saw her," Liam continued. "The mistress, Jessica. She was walking around with a glass of wine, pointing at things for the movers to throw out. She was laughing, Connor. She was repainting the nursery in her head, while Selene is lying here hooked up to machines." Liam slammed his fist into his open palm. "Let me go back. I can take the guards. I can end this tonight." "If you go back tonight, you act out of anger," Connor said, his voice steady but hard as iron. "And when you act out of anger, you make mistakes. We don't make mistakes." The laptop pinged, a high-pitched notification sound that cut through the tension. Connor turned the screen toward Liam. "Sully found it." "Found what?" "The leverage." Connor pointed to the document on the screen. It was a bank manifest from the Cayman Islands. "Richard plays the part of the genius billionaire perfectly. But Sterling Technologies? It's bleeding money. He's been propping up the stock price by moving his own personal funds through shell companies to make it look like revenue." Liam squinted at the numbers. "Is that illegal?" "It's highly illegal. It's fraud. It's a Ponzi scheme with better branding," Connor said. "But that's not the worst part. Look at the date on this withdrawal." Liam looked. 2 days ago. $5 million. He pulled $5 million in cash and liquid assets out of the company accounts, Connor explained. "He knows the ship is sinking. He's building a golden parachute. He's planning to file for bankruptcy, leave his investors with nothing, and run off with Jessica and $5 million in hidden cash. So he kicked Selene out." "Because she was a liability," Connor finished. "If he goes bankrupt while married, the courts look at everything. If he divorces her first, frames her as unstable and secures the assets, he walks away clean." Just then, the door to the private room opened. Selene was standing there, holding on to the IV pole. She looked pale, ghosts of dark circles under her eyes, but she was awake. "He keeps a ledger," she whispered. Both brothers turned. Connor stood up immediately to help her, but she waved him off. She needed to stand. "Selene, you should be in bed," Connor said gently. "He keeps a black book," Selene said, her voice stronger than it had been the night before. "In his study, inside the false bottom of the humidors. He writes down the names of the people he bribes, the inspectors, the auditors, even the judge he plays golf with." Connor looked at Liam. A silent communication passed between them. The digital trail was good. But a physical ledger? That was a death sentence. "Does he know you know about it?" Connor asked. "No," Selene said. "I found it by accident looking for a lighter months ago. I never told him." Connor closed the laptop. The cold calculation in his eyes shifted into something darker. A plan had fully formed. "Tomorrow is Friday," Connor said. "The Sterling Gala," Selena noted, looking down. "He hosts it every year. It's where he shows off. All the investors, the press, the high society of Greenwich. They'll all be there." "Perfect," Connor said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. "Liam, get the truck ready. We need to go back to Boston for a few hours. We need suits. We need the boys." "What are we doing?" Liam asked, a savage grin finally breaking across his face. "We're going to a party," Connor said. and we're going to bring the house down." The Sterling estate looked like a palace of light. Spotlights swept the night sky, and a line of black limousines snaked up the long, winding driveway. The rain had cleared, leaving the air crisp and cold, perfect for the heavy furs and tuxedos of Connecticut's elite. Inside the grand ballroom, a massive addition Richard had built 2 years ago, the atmosphere was electric. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of champagne and caviar. A string quartet played softly in the corner. At the center of it all was Richard Sterling. He looked impeccable in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. On his arm was Jessica, wearing a shimmering silver gown that plunged deep at the neckline, diamonds dripping from her ears, diamonds that Selena had once worn. "You look like a king," Jessica whispered in his ear, nipping at his earlobe. "I feel like one," Richard replied, scanning the room. He saw his bankers, his board members, the local politicians. They were all smiling, all oblivious. "The divorce filing went through this morning. The lawyers say she hasn't even responded. She's probably cowering in a shelter somewhere." "Good riddance," Jessica laughed. "Let's make a toast." Richard tapped his spoon against his champagne flute. The room fell silent. The quartet stopped playing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard boomed, his voice projecting with the practiced charm of a sociopath. "Thank you for coming to the Sterling Future Foundation Gala. Tonight is about vision. It's about looking forward, not backward. It's about shedding the dead weight of the past to build a brighter tomorrow." There was a ripple of polite applause. "I have a special presentation for you tonight," Richard said, gesturing to the massive 40-foot screen behind him. "A look at our next phase of innovation." The lights dimmed. Richard smiled, taking a sip of his drink. But the video didn't start. Instead, the massive screen flickered with static. A harsh, screeching, audio feedback noise tore through the room, making guests cover their ears. "Technical difficulties," Richard laughed nervously. "One moment." He glared at the AV tech in the corner, but the tech was frantically typing, looking pale. Then, the screen went black. A single line of text appeared in blood-red font. The true cost of success. The doors to the ballroom, the massive double oak doors at the back of the room, slammed open with a sound like a cannon shot. The entire room turned. Standing in the doorway were 5 men. In the center was Connor O'Malley. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than most cars, tailored to fit his lean, dangerous frame perfectly. On his right was Liam, a mountain of a man in black, his tuxedo straining against his shoulders. Behind them were 3 other men from South Boston, tough, scarred, and looking entirely out of place among the Greenwich elite. They didn't look like guests. They looked like an execution squad. Richard froze. He recognized the look in their eyes, even if he didn't know their faces. It was the look of men who had nothing to lose. Connor began to walk. The crowd parted. It was instinctual. The aura of violence radiating from the O'Malley brothers was so potent that billionaires and socialites stepped back, clutching their pearls and drinks, clearing a path straight to the stage. "Security," Richard barked, his voice cracking. "Remove these men." 2 private security guards stepped forward to intercept Connor. Liam didn't even slow down. He stepped in front of Connor, moving with terrifying speed for a man his size. He grabbed the first guard by the lapels and tossed him aside like a rag doll into a table of hors d'oeuvres. The second guard reached for his taser, but one of the Boston crew behind Liam simply stepped in and stared him down. The guard froze, then slowly lowered his hand. Connor didn't stop walking until he was at the foot of the stage, looking up at Richard. "Who the hell are you?" Richard hissed, though his hands were trembling. Jessica had already taken a step back, her confidence evaporating. Connor didn't yell. He didn't scream. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a microphone. He had tapped into their wireless system. "I'm the trash," Connor said. His voice boomed through the speakers, calm and cold. "I'm the low-class family you told my sister to forget." A murmur went through the crowd. "Sister?" "Richard Sterling," Connor continued, turning to address the room. "A man of vision. A man who kicked his wife, 8 months pregnant with his son, out into a freezing rainstorm 2 nights ago because she didn't match the decor." "Liar!" Richard screamed. "She's mentally ill. She left on her own." "Is that so?" Connor pointed the remote control he held at the screen. The screen flickered again. But this time it wasn't text. It was grainy, black and white footage. It was security footage. Not from the house. Richard had deleted that. This was from the dashboard camera of a delivery truck that had been idling across the street, a detail Sully had found while scouring traffic cams. On the massive screen, the guests watched in horrified silence. They saw the front door of the Sterling estate open. They saw a suitcase fly out into the mud. They saw Celine, clearly pregnant, being shoved hard by Richard. They saw her fall. They saw Richard stand in the doorway, laughing, with Jessica leaning on his shoulder. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum. "Oh my God," a woman in the front row whispered, covering her mouth. Richard's face went white. He looked at Jessica. She was backing away from him now, shaking her head, trying to distance herself. That's doctored," Richard stammered. "Deep fake. It's AI." "And this?" Connor asked. He pressed the button again. The screen changed. It was a spreadsheet, bank accounts, shell companies. "This is the Sterling Technologies financial report," Connor announced. "Or rather, the real one. Not the one he showed you." He nodded to the board members in the front row. "The one that shows he's stolen $5 million of your money in the last 48 hours. The room erupted. The board members were on their feet. The investors were shouting. Richard looked around, wild-eyed. His world was crumbling in seconds. "Security! Police! Arrest them!" "We already called the police," Liam said, speaking for the first time. His voice was a deep rumble that carried without a microphone. "But they aren't coming for us." Sirens wailed in the distance. They were getting louder. Fast. Connor took one step up, onto the stage. Richard stumbled back, tripping over Jessica's dress train. He fell hard onto his backside, scrambling like a crab away from the man looming over him. "You took everything from her," Connor said, looking down at Richard with pure disgust. "You took her pride. You took her home. You almost took her life." Connor leaned down, his face inches from Richard's. "But you forgot one thing, Richie. Celine isn't just a Sterling. She's an O'Malley. And O'Malleys collect their debts." "Please," Richard whimpered, looking at the approaching police lights flashing through the windows. "I can pay you. I have money. Take the $5 million. Connor stood up and straightened his cuffs. "We don't want your money," Connor said. "We just wanted to make sure you didn't have any left." The double doors burst open again. This time it was the Greenwich police, followed by 2 agents from the FBI, alerted by the anonymous tip about wire fraud. "Richard Sterling," the lead agent shouted, "you are under arrest for embezzlement, securities fraud, and domestic endangerment." As the officers swarmed the stage, hauling a struggling, screaming Richard to his feet, Liam looked at Jessica. She was standing alone, shivering, clutching her clutch purse. Liam walked up to her. She looked up at him, terrified. I didn't know," she stammered. "I was just doing what he said." Liam leaned in close. "The car you drove here, the Mercedes." "Yes? It's leased in the company name," Liam said. "Which means it's evidence now. You're walking home." He turned his back on her. Connor and Liam walked out of the ballroom, side by side, passing the stunned crowd. They didn't look back at the chaos they had unleashed. They didn't look back at the man screaming in handcuffs. They walked out into the cool night air. "Did we get it?" Liam asked as they reached the truck. Connor held up a small, black leather notebook he had swiped from Richard's jacket pocket during the confrontation on stage, the ledger Selena had told them about. "We got it," Connor said. "This is the nail in the coffin. He's never getting out." "Let's go home," Liam said. "Selene's waiting." 6 months had passed since the night the lights went out at the Sterling Gala. The winter in South Boston was just as cold as it was in Greenwich. But it felt different. In Greenwich, the cold was sterile, isolated behind triple-paned glass. In Southie, the cold was something you fought together, with radiators clanking, pots of stew boiling on the stove, and family crowded into living rooms. Selene sat in the rocking chair by the window of the second-floor apartment on East Broadway. It wasn't a mansion. The floorboards creaked, and the view was of the street below, not a private manicured garden. But it was hers. In her arms, sleeping soundly wrapped in a knitted blue blanket, was baby Jack. He had arrived 3 weeks early, a fighter from the very first breath. He had his father's dark hair, but he had the O'Malley chin, stubborn and strong. The door to the apartment creaked open. Liam walked in, trying to be quiet, which was impossible for a man of his size. He was covered in grease from the shop, but his hands were scrubbed pink and clean. "Is the little man asleep?" Liam whispered, tiptoeing in his heavy boots. "Out like a light," Selene smiled. "Did you finish the nursery?" "Connor's putting the last shelf up," Liam grinned. "It's not Italian marble, Sadie, but it's solid oak. I built it myself." "It's perfect," she said, and she meant it. Life had changed drastically. The first month had been a nightmare of legal battles and depositions, but Connor had been right about everything. The black ledger they had stolen from Richard's pocket was the key. It didn't just expose Richard, it exposed everyone. The judges, the inspectors, the silent partners. The fallout was nuclear. Because Selene had cooperated with the FBI, and because Connor had hired the best shark of a defense attorney in Boston, Selena was granted immunity. More importantly, the fraud investigation triggered a clause in her prenuptial agreement. Since Richard had committed felonies to hide assets, the fidelity and conduct clause was voided. The courts had liquidated Richard's estate. The creditors took most of it. But there was a remainder, and because Richard was now a felon facing 20 years without parole, the judge awarded the remaining liquid assets to Selene for child support and restitution. It wasn't $40 million, but it was $2 million, enough to buy this building, fix up the auto shop for her brothers, and start a college fund for Jack. "Turn on the TV," Connor said, walking in from the hallway, dusting sawdust off his shoulder. "It's starting." Liam grabbed the remote and clicked on the local news. The screen showed the exterior of the federal courthouse. A reporter stood in the wind, clutching a microphone. In a stunning conclusion to the Sterling financial scandal, Richard Sterling was sentenced today to 25 years in federal prison. The judge cited the callous and predatory nature of his crimes, not only against his investors, but against his own family. The camera cut to footage of Richard being led out of the courthouse. He looked unrecognizable. The bespoke suits were gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His hair, once perfectly coiffed, was thinning and grey. He looked old. He looked broken. As he was shoved into the back of the transport van, he looked up at the camera. For a fleeting second, his eyes were filled with a terrifying realization. He was going to a place where his money meant nothing, and where the name O'Malley had a very long reach. "And what of Jessica Vane?" the reporter continued. The screen showed a clip of Jessica leaving a smaller courthouse. She looked haggard, wearing oversized sunglasses, being booed by a crowd of former employees who had lost their pensions. Ms. Vane has pleaded guilty to conspiracy and obstruction of justice. She received a suspended sentence and 3 years of probation, but reports indicate she has filed for bankruptcy and is currently facing multiple civil lawsuits. Liam snorted. Probation? She got off easy. She didn't get off, Connor said, popping a beer and sitting on the sofa. She's a pariah, Liam. She has no money, no friends, and a criminal record. For a woman like that, being poor and irrelevant is a fate worse than jail. Celine looked down at Jack. She felt a strange sensation. She expected to feel happy or vindicated. Instead, she just felt relief. The weight was gone. The fear was gone. He wrote me a letter, Celine said softly. The room went quiet. Connor's eyes narrowed. Richard? From his holding cell. It came through the lawyer today. Did you read it? Liam asked, his hands balling into fists. I did, Celine said. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She didn't read it aloud. She didn't need to. It was a pathetic attempt at manipulation. Richard had begged. He had claimed he still loved her. He had blamed the stress, the business, even Jessica. He had asked her to bring Jack to visit him. He wanted to see his son. Selena stood up, careful not to wake the baby. She walked over to the small fireplace, where a modest fire was crackling. What did it say? Connor asked. It said he's sorry, Selena said. It said he's lonely. She tossed the letter into the fire. They watched as the paper curled and blackened. The words, love, regret, second chance, disappeared into smoke and ash, sucked up the chimney and out into the cold Boston night. He doesn't have a son, Selena said, her voice strong and clear. He chose his legacy. This... She looked at Liam and Connor, and down at the sleeping baby. This is my legacy. You're damn right it is, Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. We have dinner in an hour, Connor said, standing up and checking his watch. Ma's recipe, pot roast. I'll set the table, Selena said. She walked to the window one last time. The snow was starting to fall, covering the grim streets of South Boston in a layer of clean white powder. Down below, the neon sign of O'Malley Brothers Auto flickered to life, buzzing with a steady, reliable hum. She wasn't the wife of a millionaire anymore. She wasn't a socialite. She wasn't wearing diamonds. She was Celine O'Malley. She was a mother. She was a sister. And for the first time in years, she was free. The glass house had shattered, but the foundation she built on the rubble was made of iron, and iron doesn't break. Selena's story is a brutal reminder that money often masks the ugliest truths. Richard Sterling thought his wealth made him untouchable. He thought people were disposable, even his own wife and unborn child. But he made the classic mistake of the arrogant. He confused kindness with weakness. He didn't realize that the strongest bonds aren't bought with stocks and bonds. They are forged in blood and loyalty. In the end, Richard sits alone in a concrete cell with nothing but his memories of a life he threw away, while Celine, surrounded by the family she was forced to abandon, found a richness that Richard will never understand. Wow. That ending gave me chills. It's terrifying to think people like Richard actually exist, isn't it? I want to know what you think. Did Richard get what he deserved with 25 years in prison? Or should the O'Malley brothers have handled it their way? And what about Jessica? Do you think she was a victim or a villain? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and revenge, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy one coming up next week about a lottery winner whose husband tried to commit her to an asylum to steal the ticket. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.